You know, it's great to be here. I haven't been in the halls of the Connecticut State Capitol in a long time, but what a beautiful building and what a wonderful venue. And it's an honor for me to be here. And Dawn alluded in her introductory remarks that you wanted to give Massachusetts a run for its money. Well, you know something? This Massachusetts guy thinks that's wicked awesome. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to tell you how we did it. Right? This didn't happen by chance in Massachusetts in the last decade. So I want to talk a little bit about how that happened, and then I want to tell you why I think it's important that we share this information and why I think it's important that every state in the country really buy into this industry, because it's such an important industry. The mission of Mass Bio, very similar to the mission of Bio Connecticut, it's to advance Massachusetts leadership in the life sciences, to grow the industry, add value to the healthcare system, and most importantly, to improve the lives of patients. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, improving the lives of patients. I'm going to talk about adding value to the healthcare system and also grow the industry from an economic development standpoint, because that's so important. Just by way of background, Dawn told you I'm a recovering politician, okay? I've been out of government for the last 10 years. It's been the best 10 years of my life. If there's any elected officials here, I apologize for that statement, but thank you for your service. But boy, is it great when you get back out into the private sector. I grew up early days in the private sector, and I worked in the environmental services industry. While I was doing that, I was on the school committee in my town at a very young age. Then I got elected to the Board of Selectmen in my town. So I was working at a company called Clean Harbors Environmental Services. I got in on the ground floor, did a lot of work in this lovely state. And at the same time, I found that I loved local government and I loved public service. So I decided when I was about 30 years old that I was going to leave the private sector and run for the legislature in Massachusetts. And the reason I wanted to do that was to make Massachusetts a more business-friendly state. That was my platform that I ran on back then, but my platform changed a little bit. I never lost sight of the fact that I wanted to make Massachusetts a more business-friendly state, but something happened in my life. Something happened to my wife and I. And it was kind of tragic, but it's, you know, the story isn't over yet, and the story gets a little bit better. And I just want to share this with all of you, because if I didn't have this perspective, I don't think I ever would have realized how important of a role government plays in the lives of sick people, people who are facing unmet medical need, people who are born with a rare genetic disorder which is deadly, it's fatal, and of which there was no cure. My wife and I found out at 21 weeks, while I was running for the legislature, that we were going to have, because screening for unborn children started, the mother got screened for cystic fibrosis test. It wasn't for my first two kids. When we were having our third child, we found out at 21 weeks that that baby in my wife's belly was going to have cystic fibrosis. That's tough news to take. Back then, you know, that was over 15 years ago, 16 years ago. There wasn't really that bright of an outlook for cystic fibrosis. I was familiar with the disease because my brother married into a family. You know, it's a genetic thing, and the disease was prevalent in our family, and I was involved with helping to raise money through a Great Strides Walk when I was chairman of the Board of Selectmen in my town. But now, my life took a real sharp turn. Now the clock started ticking. I had a baby born while I was getting sworn into the legislature that came with an expiration date. So for me personally, this wasn't just about growing the economy in Massachusetts. It was, how could I be a lawmaker? How could I go to work every day to make our hospitals better? How could I make our universities better? How could I work with these smart people that had the God-given brains to actually cure diseases? How could I give them a climate so that they can succeed and ultimately make it so that my kid doesn't die before me? Because I used to have nightmares about my son dying before me. And the reason I share that story, because that was the real life experience that caused me to really take a look at everything from economic development, tax code, what do we need for incentive plans, what can government do so that we can get better. If you look at what we had from an academia standpoint, we had some, I don't know, you guys heard of Harvard? I mean, it's no Yale, but I always say that to my friends that go to Harvard. I say, you didn't have the grades to go to Yale? They love that. But just so you know, when people go to Yale, I say you didn't have the grades to go to Harvard, right? But you look at what we had from an academia standpoint, you look at what we had from the academic medical center standpoint, we had a really lot of smart people doing really amazing things. We had, you know, the foundation of the biotech industry, the Genzymes, the Biogens, the Integrated Genetics Institute, those companies that really founded a lot of what was going on in genetic engineering, which it was known as when it first started. We had that base, but what we didn't have was a government that was willing to partner. So when I talk about what changed in the last 10 years, and one of the reasons I was so excited to leave government and take over MassBio, it was September 1st, 2007. We were facing a depression. We knew times were bad. The IPO market was going away, but we knew we had a lot of these small, great companies. We had biopharma companies. There was only one or two pharma companies that even had a physical presence in Massachusetts at that time. What is it that we could do so that we could really continue to grow despite the economic downturn? Well, we put together a 10-year, $1 billion life science initiative, and this was from our Democratic governor, Deval Patrick, at the time. He didn't want to pick winners or losers. What Deval Patrick wanted to do was play our strengths. What are we good at in Massachusetts? We have smart people. We have smart people. The weather is horrible, ladies and gentlemen. The traffic's even worse. I do think we have better parking around our State House than you do, by the way. I'm gonna have to leave in 2 minutes to put 2 more quarters in and then come back. But that's a joke. So the resources that we had in Massachusetts is really our people. It's our academia, it's the science, it's the fact that we get a disproportionate large share of NIH funding. How do we turn those ideas and that science into companies? So we're going to focus on company creation. The Life Science Initiative has one bucket. There's 3 buckets of incentives. One of them is to help seed funding for small companies, right? Because company creation is important. There's another bucket that is tax incentives and infrastructure improvements around large pharma companies that we were able to recruit. The big piece is the tax incentive based on jobs created, all right? This isn't a handout. We're giving a tax break based on jobs that are created. Those jobs created still pay back to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts more than it costs the taxpayers. This isn't picking in winners and losers. It's not a handout. It's an incentive plan based on jobs created. And then the third piece is really how do we focus on workforce development? What can we do with academia and academic medical centers to build more infrastructure so that we can expand the capabilities of smart people to do smart things that ultimately turn into companies? And that's why the big pharma companies wanted to come, to access what was going on with these smart people and the small companies created. Because when Wall Street went away, we weren't going to have IPOs. The small companies needed to do business development deals with the large pharma companies. So we started creating an infrastructure in Massachusetts so that big pharma and baby biotech could communicate, and in the middle, government said, we're going to do whatever it is that you need so that we can make this happen. So let's fast forward 10 years. After the Life Science Center, I mean, a lot of people didn't know if this was going to work. The Life Science Center was established, 10-year, billion-dollar fund, and what's happened in the last 10 years? Industry's grown by 20% in employment, and keep in mind, 07 to 2012, no IPOs. More R&D employees in Massachusetts than any other state, including that huge, monstrous state of California on the West Coast. And the reason I bring up California is because we're going to talk about regionalism in New York, and we're going to end this conversation about how we compete with the West Coast by doing things as a region here in New England. 18 of the top 20 pharma companies now have a physical presence. Blows my mind. $9.3 billion in payroll, in R&D in Massachusetts. Think of what that does for our tax base, ladies and gentlemen. This makes money for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We've added over 11 million square feet of lab space in the last 10 years, and it's all filled. 11 million square feet. So think of what that does for the construction trades. Think of what it does for everybody, restaurants, everything that's going on in that area. 5 of the top 6 NIH-funded hospitals you can walk to from my office in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We continue to outpace all states in terms of NIH funding per capita, and we're second only to California. But when you go per capita and you look at the chart, we crush them. And I like to remind California that regularly. $2.9 billion in venture capital investment in 2016, $3 billion in VC dollars in 17, and over the last 4 years, over $10 billion in venture capital money. Mass headquartered companies right now, Massachusetts headquartered companies have 20 candidates pending FDA approval. 20 candidates as we sit here today, 20 new drugs that are going to change the lives of sick people. And we have 1,900 candidates in the pipeline, which represents 19% of the US pipeline and 9% of the world's pipeline of drugs. So, why do I say all that? And I'm not sitting here, I'm not up here just throwing out these stats to say, oh, Massachusetts is awesome, all right? I said earlier at a breakfast meeting we had, people in Massachusetts have always benefited from their Yankee ingenuity. The downfall is the Yankee arrogance. And the reality is, we can't be arrogant about this. We need to share ideas. Every single state should be able to do what we did. Do you have a good hospital in Connecticut, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, you do. Do you have amazing universities? I already talked about UConn, Yale, many more, right? Do you have smart people? You got a ton of smart people. You have all that. What do you need to do? The message you need to get to your administration and your members of the legislature is that if academia and industry and now government all work together, there isn't a problem you can't solve. You can get this done. So for us in Massachusetts, we're not going to give up on that. I consider my job and the job of MassBio, and I see many member companies that are members of Connecticut Bio and MassBio, our job is to make sure that those key players in industry stay on course. Key players in government, stay on course or you're getting elected out of office. And the key players from academia, keep being smart and work closely. Get those tech transfer offices aligned with what we're doing, because science means nothing if you don't turn it into a company and ultimately help a patient. What's the sense of it? So now, I'm happy to say 10 years later, the flywheel is spinning, everybody's humming, everybody's on the same page. If anyone in that cast of characters steps out of line, we make sure that they are admonished, and they have to get in line. And it's a cultural thing, it's a behavioral thing. Our government officials meet with CEOs of member companies and say, we want you here in Massachusetts. Everybody should do that. These people in the private sector, they just want to know that you need, that you want them here, and you're going to work with them, and you're going to help them solve problems. I mean, to think of the town meeting form of government that we have in Massachusetts, and that horrible permitting process, and the horrible everything. It takes forever to do anything. Well, we've changed that. We have bio-ready communities. We have cities and towns fighting with each other to look at opportunities, saying, we can do it quicker, we can do it faster, we can do it better, we'll do tax incremental financing, we'll do a TIF for you, because we want to compete. So to have this level of competition, I used to say it's like the Belichick model, and that's why the Patriots will win, but we've had a slow year, right? We've had a slow year with that Super Bowl, so we're going to use some different analogies, but it's the same idea. Everybody do your job, right? If everybody does your job, we'll continue to win. So what's next? What's next for us is really making sure that continuity in government takes place. And I'm proud to say, hey, I was a lifelong Democrat in Massachusetts, but I was a fiscal conservative, business-friendly, socially liberal person. So what is that? It's no different than Charlie Baker, who's our Republican governor in Massachusetts right now. He hasn't missed a beat. He took the baton from our Democratic governor, Deval Patrick, took it, looked at what worked and what didn't work, and said, more importantly, what's next? The Life Science Initiative that was drafted for the last 10 years does not meet the needs of what we need for the next 10 years. Doesn't have any, the first one didn't even acknowledge convergence in digital health. It didn't do enough for workforce development. We didn't know we were going to create close to 30% employment growth. We need to make sure we focus on workforce development so that these jobs, the job growth, and these companies we've recruited, it's sustainable, and that's only through people. And then we also need to make sure we focus on biomanufacturing. Biomanufacturing, contract research and contract manufacturing. If you asked me 10 years ago if you thought Massachusetts could ever win the amount of biomanufacturing opportunities, I would have said no way. Again, I talked about the weather being horrible and the traffic being horrible, but the price of housing's expensive, the land is expensive, access to water and sewage is difficult. I didn't think we could do it, but the reason we are growing in that space is because of the workforce. And we're only going to increase our likelihood of success. I can't just throw a circle of these are the people that work around Cambridge and Boston. That's already built out. We're sprawling. We're growing out in central Massachusetts, western Massachusetts. We have a strategy for Springfield, Mass. We can't do that without help from folks from eastern New York and Connecticut. You know, we can't do this without working with folks from Rhode Island. And again, let's take it even further. There isn't a month that goes by where we don't talk to people from Ohio, Connecticut, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota. They have great ideas coming out of their hospitals and universities too. And we need to work together to create them into companies. Because let's go back to the beginning of this story. I have a kid that doesn't have a therapy for his cystic fibrosis. There have been 2 that have been invented, and it just by chance, it's a company that's in Massachusetts. There will be a 3rd, and it is going to work for him, so I don't want to depress all you guys. I think the story's going to be a good one. I think my kid's going to live, right? And that's an important aspect of what we do here. But I've never cared, like I never said that that has to be a Massachusetts company. We need the best and brightest people from around the United States and around the world. So immigration orders are key, people. We can't not allow smart people from other countries into our country. That's a baloney, not to get political here in the Connecticut State House. But that's stupid, right? So we got to focus on partnering. We need to focus on regionalism. I'm so excited to continue to work with Dawn. I worked with Paul in the past, and now Dawn at BioConnecticut, and we want to make sure that we are true partners, because I don't care where cystic fibrosis drugs come from. I certainly don't care where the cure from cystic fibrosis comes from. I want it to happen, and the only way we do that is by working in a true partnership and teamwork. The same way academia, industry, and government all need to work together, we all as a society need to work together so that we can end illness. Now in closing, I'm just going to talk about the cost and what's wrong with healthcare. We have a sick care system. We don't have a health care system. We need to change our payer system so that these new therapies and these new drugs can be absorbed. They're going to be a significant upfront cost, but there's no way to save money in health care more, ladies and gentlemen, than by inventing a cure. And for the first time, now we're talking about cures. We have a cure for hepatitis C. We've got a cure for a rare form of blindness. We're going to have a cure for this, that, the other. I don't even want to get into the diseases because we're going to cure all of them. That's why this job's so awesome. It's an honor for me to be here. Thank you for inviting me. If any of you have any questions or comments or any ideas on how we can work closely together, I'm more than happy to hear them. You can find me at www.massbio.org. Thank you very much.